Close your eyes for a minute and imagine that no matter how hard your parents work each day, sometimes there's no dinner. No matter how many hours, no matter how many jobs, no matter even if you get a job in the kitchen, sometimes there's nothing to eat. What would you do? Would you break the law to eat? Sometimes that's what people have to do. Then what happens? You break the law and you go to jail. You serve your sentence and are released, but in all that time, nothing has changed. You struggle even more than before to find a well paying, steady job, especially with your criminal record, and are in the exact same situation you were before. No way to feed yourself or those you care about. For many Americans, this unimaginable situation isn't just a reality, it's a cycle that continues throughout their entire lives. The US prison system is ineffective in its purpose of rehabilitation, serving more as a detriment to our society rather than a benefit. For this reason, a policy should be enacted by the United States government that will decrease crimes committed out of necessity by providing for our community's needs, as well as decrease recidivism rates by implementing programs in prisons. The American prison system has proven itself to be a discriminatory system, unhelpful in preventing future crime, demonstrating its need for the aforementioned policy, which will improve the lives of many of those in prison, as well as society as a whole. One question you might be asking yourself is, what's the problem with our prison system in the first place? Our criminal justice system has a long history of preying on racial and socioeconomic minorities and provides little in the way of rehabilitation. The most vulnerable of our society have always been the most prevalent populations in our prisons. Ever since the establishment of the US penal system in 1891, prisons have primarily consisted of racial minorities, especially from the Black community, as well as the poorest of our society. These demographics stem from societally influenced laws following the outlaw slavery in 1865, creating a trend that has continued to today. The nonprofit organization Prison Policy Initiatives report reveals that racial minorities and those with lower socioeconomic statuses are significantly overrepresented in our prisons. Black people account for 47% less of the total United States population than white people, but both of these demographic groups make up the same percentage of our prison population. There are similarly disturbing discrepancies in the socioeconomic status of imprisoned people compared to others. The average annual income of a non-incarcerated person is almost double the pre-incarceration annual income of those in prison. All of these statistics showcase the alarming disparities in our prison demographics, indicating that our current criminal justice system unfairly targets those in our society who need our help the most. According to Southern Poverty Law Center, a nonprofit legal advocacy organization, African American men who don't attain a high school level of education are more likely to end up behind bars than employed. In addition to the concerning composition of the US prison system, 70% of all incarcerated people experience recidivism, repeating a criminal act, within 5 years of their release and end up right back in prison. This is due to the failures of the US prison system to support offenders as they return to their lives after their sentence is complete. Many former prisoners struggle to find work and reconnect, and are left on their own without being given the tools for success during their incarceration. Many of these statistics I have discussed come down to two simple problems. My proposed policy will address both the unjustifiable demographics in prison population by focusing on giving resources to communities in need, as well as the issue of recidivism by providing more resources for incarcerated individuals. Both aspects of this policy will be enacted by the United States government and state governments to cover both prisons and jails. The first part of my policy focuses on what causes people to commit crimes in the first place. By using government resources to provide aid in communities struggling with poverty, crimes committed strictly out of need for basic necessity will significantly decrease. Much of the overrepresentation of racial and socioeconomic minorities in prisons and jails comes from crimes committed in struggling communities. By addressing this problem of need, racial and socioeconomic minorities will not make up so much of our criminal population. The second part of my policy addresses recidivism. The Office of Justice Programs with the U.S. Department of Justice states that the goals of correction include rehabilitation and social reintegration, but this is something they currently don't accomplish. People left without assistance in returning to their lives after incarceration often struggle because prison itself provides no skills or opportunities for improvement. My proposed policy will help the U.S. Department of Justice reach their correctional goals of rehabilitation and social reintegration by creating programs in prison to further inmates' education, skill set, and social and professional networks. By giving these tools to people in prison, their opportunities once they're released are exponentially greater, making them less likely to experience recidivism because they have a greater chance of successfully living a productive life. Think back to the scenario you imagined earlier and the positive effects my policy will have on it. Both the need to commit a crime in the first place, as well as the cycle of crime you fell into, will be addressed through the two facets of the policy. Growing up in a family crippled by poverty drove you to criminal acts out of necessity, But with governmental resources being devoted to helping communities such as yours, you no longer have to go down that path. The US Department of Health and Human Services identifies a lack of resources such as housing, food, and safety as what contributes to the cycle of poverty. With resources being allocated specifically to fill those needs, the cycle can be broken. Disadvantaged people will finally have what they need to be able to thrive. I recognize that there aren't always enough resources to go around, and I cannot entirely eliminate crimes committed out of necessity, which is why the second aspect of my policy is just as important as the first. Just as my policy works to break the cycle of poverty, it also works to break the cycle of crime. By building up people's education, skills, and support network, including professional, associates, and friends or family, they have the chance to create a successful life for themselves once they're released. The nonprofit and nonpartisan policy research organization, MDRC, conducted a study on reducing recidivism through increasing opportunity using a similar policy involving job opportunities following offenders' release from prison. It was successful in terms of preventing recidivism, in terms of creating a stable and healthy environment for released individuals, and in terms of costs compared to benefits of the program. The success of this test case has implications for the success of mine and how beneficial it can be overall. By addressing both what causes crime in the first place and what causes the cycle of crime to continue, my proposed policy would create better lives in needy communities, make prison a more reformative institution, and create a more prolific society for our country. Now that you have a better grasp of the positive effects my policy will have on our entire society, I hope you will join me in taking action. Here are two links to find your governmental officials that you can contact. The first link is for the US Congress members, and the second is for representatives and the Texas state government. Feel free to pause and take a screenshot or type it into your browser to find your elected officials. Please take the time to write a message or otherwise contact these governmental officials in support of my policy. Together, we can make a difference in our prison policies for the better. Our prison system has long been discriminatory and unhelpful in preventing future crime, and would benefit from my proposed policy, which will significantly improve the lives of many of those in prison as well as society as a whole. Now, when you imagine yourself in situations such as the one we pictured earlier, you will recognize the benefits my policy can have on people who need our help the most.